Floor, and you know what I'm talking about here on my channel right now.
The legal conflict between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni is approaching what many observers believe could be one of the most important moments in the entire dispute, and after months of tension, legal filings, public debate, media coverage, and intense speculation online, the judge involved in the case may soon make a key decision that could influence how the situation develops from this point forward. Reports and discussions among legal commentators suggest that the ruling on one of the major motions in the case could arrive very soon, possibly within the week, and this possibility has created a new wave of conversation across media platforms and commentary channels that follow celebrity legal disputes. Many people who have been watching the situation closely are asking the same questions. What exactly will the judge decide? What will that decision mean for both sides? And which party might benefit the most from the outcome? While most legal battles are usually seen as simple competitions where one side clearly wants to win and the other side clearly wants to avoid losing, this particular situation has led some observers to raise a different and somewhat surprising theory. According to some legal analysts and commentators who study high-profile disputes, there are scenarios in which Blake Lively might not necessarily be harmed if a specific ruling does not go in her favor. In fact, some have suggested that certain outcomes that appear negative on the surface could still create strategic advantages depending on how the case continues to develop. At first, this idea may sound unusual because most people naturally assume that every legal team wants a quick and decisive victory in court, but complex cases, especially those involving celebrities and public attention, often operate very differently. In these situations, the path a case takes, the information that becomes public during the process, and the way the story is interpreted by audiences can sometimes matter almost as much as the final judgment itself. To understand why some commentators believe this possibility exists, it is helpful to look back at how the disagreement between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni first started and how it eventually evolved into a legal conflict that attracted widespread attention. The situation did not begin as a courtroom battle but rather as a professional dispute connected to a film project and the interactions that followed between the individuals involved. In the early stages, the issue appeared to be a disagreement between professionals working in the same creative industry, something that happens frequently in film production where strong personalities, high budgets, and complicated schedules can sometimes lead to misunderstandings or disagreements about decisions. However, what might normally remain a private professional dispute gradually became more serious as the situation escalated and more people became involved. Statements were made, responses followed, and eventually legal teams began to play a role in shaping the conversation. When lawyers enter a conflict, the entire tone of the situation usually changes. What once may have been informal discussions or private disagreements becomes formal communication supported by documents, evidence, and legal arguments. As the dispute moved into the legal system, filings began to appear and the narrative surrounding the situation expanded. Supporters of each side began interpreting the events differently. People who believed Blake Lively's perspective argued that she had legitimate concerns and reasons for raising the issues that eventually became part of the case, while those who supported Justin Baldoni believed he had evidence and explanations that challenged the claims being made against him. As weeks passed, information connected to the case began appearing in reports, articles, and commentary videos that analyzed the filings and attempted to explain the possible strategies behind the actions of both legal teams. In high-profile cases like this one, the legal battle often unfolds in two very different environments at the same time. One environment is the courtroom itself, where judges review motions, lawyers present arguments, and decisions are made according to legal standards and procedures. The other environment exists in the public sphere, where media outlets, online creators, and social media discussions interpret the events and shape how the broader public understands what is happening. These two environments sometimes influence each other even though they operate under very different rules. Inside the courtroom, the process follows structured procedures that determine how evidence is presented and how arguments are evaluated. Judges must consider legal precedent, statutes, and the specific details of the case before making a decision. Outside the courtroom, the conversation is much less controlled. Public opinion can shift quickly, and every new headline or update can lead to new interpretations about what the events might mean. This is especially true when the individuals involved are well-known public figures whose careers already attract media attention. In the case involving Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, commentators have spent a significant amount of time discussing the legal motions that have been filed as part of the dispute. A motion, in legal terms, is essentially a request asking the judge to make a decision about a specific issue within the case. These requests can take many forms depending on what the legal team hopes to achieve. For example, a motion might ask the court to dismiss certain claims, limit the types of evidence that can be introduced, or determine whether particular parts of the case should move forward. When a judge reviews such requests, the ruling can have a major influence on how the case develops. Sometimes a motion can remove large portions of a case or even end the dispute entirely if the judge decides that the claims do not meet the legal requirements necessary to continue. In other situations, a judge may deny the motion, allowing the case to move forward into additional phases that involve deeper examination of the facts. According to many observers following the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni situation, the judge may soon rule on one of the key motions connected to the dispute. If that ruling arrives soon, it could represent one of the most important turning points in the case so far because it will help determine what the next stage of the legal process will look like. However, it is important to understand that a ruling on a motion does not always end a case or determine the final outcome. Instead, it often shapes the path the case will follow next. If the judge grants a motion to dismiss certain claims, those parts of the case may disappear, narrowing the scope of the dispute. If the judge denies such a request, the case may continue into a longer process that involves additional filings, evidence exchanges, and potentially more hearings. This possibility is what leads to the theory some commentators have raised about Blake Lively potentially benefiting from an outcome that might initially appear negative. In complex legal strategy, the goal is not always to win every individual step but to position the case in a way that creates the best possible opportunity for success later. If a judge declines to remove parts of a case early, the dispute may proceed into a phase known as discovery. Discovery is one of the most significant stages in civil litigation because it allows both sides to request and examine information from each other. During this stage, lawyers can ask for documents, communication records, contracts, emails, messages, and other materials that may be connected to the events being discussed in the case. They can also conduct depositions, which involve questioning individuals under oath about their knowledge of the situation. In many high-profile legal battles, discovery is the stage where the most detailed information becomes available because both sides are required to share evidence that might support or challenge the claims involved. For observers who follow celebrity legal disputes, discovery often becomes the period when the story grows even larger as new details emerge and attract media attention. Because of this, some analysts believe that extending a case into discovery could create opportunities for each side to strengthen its narrative depending on what information becomes public. Another factor that contributes to the theory about Blake Lively potentially benefiting from certain outcomes involves the broader public narrative. In celebrity conflicts, public perception can influence careers, business partnerships, and future opportunities. If a judge denies a motion from one side, the media coverage surrounding the decision may shift the conversation in ways that create sympathy, renewed interest, or additional scrutiny of the other side. The way a story develops across headlines and commentary can sometimes shape how audiences interpret the motives and credibility of the people involved. None of this means that any legal team deliberately hopes to lose in court, because lawyers generally work toward achieving the strongest legal position possible. However, experienced attorneys also prepare for multiple outcomes and consider how each possibility might affect the long-term direction of the case. They know that a single ruling rarely determines everything and that the strategy often involves thinking several steps ahead. At this stage, both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni appear to be waiting for the judge's decision while their legal teams prepare for whatever outcome might occur. Each side has already presented arguments explaining why the law supports its position. And the responsibility now rests with the judge to examine those arguments carefully before issuing a ruling. If the decision does arrive soon, it could influence the momentum of the dispute and shape how the next chapter unfolds. A favorable ruling for Justin Baldoni could strengthen his defense and reinforce the arguments his legal team has been making about the claims involved in the case. On the other hand, if the ruling does not align with what Blake Lively's legal team requested, it does not necessarily mean her broader strategy has failed, because the legal process may continue in ways that open new paths for both sides. As the situation develops, observers will continue watching closely for any sign of how the judge interprets the filings and what that interpretation might mean for the future of the case. What is clear is that the upcoming decision, whenever it arrives, will likely become one of the defining moments in the dispute between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, and it may determine not only how the legal battle proceeds but also how the story surrounding the conflict continues to unfold in the public eye. Beyond the courtroom arguments, the dispute involving Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has grown into something larger than a typical legal disagreement, becoming a conversation not only about legal claims but also about reputation, public perception, and the long-term consequences that often follow when a conflict unfolds in the public eye, especially in an industry like Hollywood where image and public trust play a powerful role in shaping careers and future opportunities. In the entertainment world, legal battles rarely stay limited to the courtroom because the individuals involved are often public figures whose professional lives depend heavily on how audiences, studios, and collaborators perceive them. When a dispute becomes public, every development, every filing, and every rumor can influence how people interpret the situation. Because of that, the strategy behind a legal case sometimes includes considerations that go far beyond simply winning or losing a single ruling. Lawyers and advisors often think about the long-term path of the dispute and how each stage of the process might affect both the legal outcome and the public narrative that forms around it. This is one reason some observers who follow high-profile legal cases have suggested that Blake Lively might not necessarily fear a temporary setback in the courtroom if the judge rules against a particular motion submitted by her legal team. In many legal disputes, especially complicated ones involving multiple claims or counterclaims, the process moves forward in stages rather than ending with one single decision. A ruling on a motion may influence the direction of the case, but it does not always determine the final result. Instead, it can simply open the door to the next phase of the process. Lawyers who work on major cases often plan for different scenarios and consider how each possible outcome might shape the strategy moving forward. They think not only about the immediate effect of a ruling but also about how the case might develop weeks or months later, including the possibility of appeals, additional filings, negotiations, or other legal actions that may follow. Because of this layered approach to legal strategy, a decision that appears negative on the surface may not necessarily end the chances of success for the side that requested the motion. Instead, it may lead the case into another stage where new opportunities emerge. If the judge rules against a motion from Blake Lively's side, one possible result is that the case would continue deeper into the legal process rather than ending early. That continuation could involve additional hearings, expanded legal arguments, and the exchange of documents and testimony that provide a clearer understanding of what actually happened behind the scenes. For those who follow the case closely, this stage of the process could bring new information that was not previously visible to the public. In civil litigation, one of the most important phases is the period known as discovery. During discovery, both sides have the ability to request evidence and information from each other that may be relevant to the claims being discussed in the case. This can include written communications, emails, contracts, internal documents, text messages, or other materials that might shed light on the events that led to the dispute. Lawyers may also conduct depositions, which involve questioning individuals under oath about their knowledge of the situation. Depositions can include not only the main parties involved in the case but also other individuals who may have witnessed or participated in events connected to the dispute. In many high-profile cases, discovery becomes the stage where the story becomes more detailed and complex because the information exchanged during this process can reveal perspectives and facts that were not previously available to the public. For that reason, some analysts believe that allowing a case to move further into discovery can sometimes benefit a party that believes additional evidence will support their position. At the same time, discovery also places both sides under greater scrutiny because each party must provide information requested by the other side within the boundaries established by the court. This means that if the case continues, both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni could face increased attention as documents, testimony, and legal arguments become part of the official record. In celebrity disputes, that attention often spreads quickly beyond the courtroom because media outlets, online commentators, and social media discussions frequently analyze every new detail that becomes available. A single document or statement introduced during discovery can quickly become the subject of headlines and online debates. This dynamic is one of the reasons why legal conflicts involving public figures often feel very different from private legal disputes. The courtroom remains the official place where decisions are made, but the public conversation can influence how the situation is understood by audiences around the world. For Justin Baldoni, the upcoming ruling also carries important implications. If the judge rules in his favor on a key motion, it could strengthen his argument that the claims against him should not continue in the form originally presented. Such a ruling could signal that the court views certain arguments from his legal team as persuasive or legally sound. A favorable decision at this stage can sometimes shift momentum within a case, encouraging supporters and shaping how the industry views the dispute. However, even a ruling that favors Baldoni would not necessarily end every aspect of the conflict, because many legal cases continue through additional stages even after early motions are resolved. If the dispute moves forward, Baldoni and his legal team will also need to prepare for the possibility of extended legal proceedings that require time, resources, and careful strategy. Discovery, depositions, and document exchanges can involve significant effort from both sides as lawyers review large volumes of information and prepare questions designed to clarify the facts. In cases involving public figures, this process often attracts attention from journalists and commentators who attempt to interpret each development. Another factor that makes this moment particularly significant is timing. Legal systems are often slow by nature because judges must review arguments carefully and ensure that decisions follow established legal standards. However, the public conversation surrounding celebrity disputes moves at a much faster pace. Online discussions can begin within minutes of a new update appearing, and different interpretations can spread rapidly across social media platforms. If the judge issues a ruling in the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case within the coming days, it will almost certainly trigger a new wave of commentary and analysis. News organizations may publish articles explaining the decision, while legal experts and online commentators may share their opinions about what the ruling means for the future of the case. During this early stage of interpretation, some explanations may be incomplete because the full implications of a legal decision are not always obvious at first glance. Court orders often contain detailed reasoning that explains how the judge evaluated the arguments presented by both sides. Those explanations can be just as important as the decision itself because they reveal how the court views the legal issues involved in the case. Experienced legal observers usually wait until they can read the exact language of a ruling before drawing strong conclusions about what it means. A decision that appears negative when summarized in a headline may actually leave open opportunities for additional arguments or future motions once the full explanation becomes clear. In the dispute involving Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, the judge's written reasoning will likely receive close attention from both legal analysts and members of the public who are interested in understanding how the court interpreted the claims and defenses presented so far. If the ruling strongly supports Baldoni's position, his supporters may view it as confirmation that his legal arguments have merit. On the other hand, if the ruling allows the case to continue into additional phases, supporters of Blake Lively may interpret that outcome as an opportunity for further examination of the events that led to the dispute. In situations like this, the same decision can sometimes be interpreted in different ways depending on the perspective of the people discussing it. Another possibility that often arises in legal conflicts is the chance of a settlement. A settlement occurs when both sides agree to resolve the dispute without continuing all the way to a full trial. Settlements can happen at many different stages of a case. Sometimes they occur early when both parties prefer to avoid a lengthy legal process. In other situations, they happen later after key rulings clarify the strengths and weaknesses of each side's arguments. When a judge issues a decision that changes the balance of a case, it can encourage both parties to re-evaluate their strategies and consider whether continuing the dispute is the best option. If the upcoming ruling significantly affects the legal position of either Blake Lively or Justin Baldoni, it could influence whether settlement discussions become more likely. Each side will evaluate the potential risks and benefits of continuing the case versus reaching an agreement that brings the conflict to an end. For now, however, much of the conversation remains focused on the anticipated ruling and what it might mean for the future of the dispute. Both legal teams have already presented their arguments to the court, and the judge will determine how the case should proceed based on those submissions. Until that decision is officially announced, observers can only analyze the available information and speculate about the possible outcomes. What is certain is that the moment when the ruling arrives will represent one of the most important turning points in the entire dispute between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Whether the decision appears to favor one side or simply moves the case into a new stage, it will shape the next chapter of the story. In a conflict that has already attracted considerable public attention, the developments that follow could become just as significant as the events that led to the dispute in the first place, and the way the situation evolves may continue to influence both the legal process and the broader conversation surrounding the individuals involved.